And if there's any other questions or anything, feel free to raise them in the chat. It'd also be great if you want to welcome yourselves to the meeting and let us know where you're coming from or your disciplines as well. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Katri.
Thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me to talk to you today. And it's great to hear that we have a very diverse group. I heard from all regions around the world, which is not always a common thing in our sector, unfortunately. I've been asked to talk about global health governance. So a bit on my background, I've worked over the last 20 years in international organizations, in NGOs, and also in government, so at global and national levels on global health. And I just wanted to start by highlighting what an important topic this is. It's not something we discuss in global health all the time, which I think also shows something about where we stand in global health in the 21st century. But it's something I think, as the Commission report says, is really has such a huge potential to transform not only the impact we have with our work, but also how we structure how we work. So I'm dialing in from Berlin in Germany. Germany is the, I think, 4th largest economy in the world, but is a real digitalization laggard. I'll just provide one example from the pandemic, which you might have heard. So when the testing started, it was really fast here in Germany and very extensive as well. All of the COVID tests had to be faxed as individual fax papers to the Public Health Authority, where some poor people working there had to tip those information into computers. So that's kind of like where I think we are in some places on digitalization, and why we need to do so much more to really get to where we are in 2022. I'm going to talk a bit about global health governance, and I'll start with a few really simple definitions so that we're on the same page for our discussion. The first is on global health. I think we all know what we're talking about, but just a reminder that global health is about all people worldwide. So it's not just about people in low and middle income countries. I think this is something we often mix up, even people who work in our sector. And some of our governance of global health also illustrates this confusion that we sometimes still have. The second definition I'd like to highlight is that of governance. It's a bit of a tricky one, but basically governance are the laws, norms, and power that help us organize our systems and our society. And if you ask, like, where is that governance in global health? It's a really tricky thing to ask. We don't have one global authority. We don't have one place to go, one court, one system. And we operate in a political system where nation states are still the highest political sovereign. So you'll have our head of state who is the highest authority. So where's global governance? Is it something that is rules-based? Is it something that's informal? I think we've got a mixture of both, but I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. I'd like to dive a bit into global health architecture and our ecosystem. And for this, I'd shared as a pre-reading a really great article by Lawrence Gostin and Siri Moon and Jacob Mason, which answers this question: where is global health governance? We actually have it. After the Second World War, all 194 member states came together and founded the World Health Organization. This is our main highest authority that we have in global health. It's the main place where we go. But as the article also says, it's not quite that simple. There are many other actors as well. But I think one way to think about governance is always, I'm a political scientist, and one of the former secretaries of state of the US, Henry Kissinger, once asked, like, if I need to know who is governing, whom do I call? So one question we could ask, and I'll be doing this throughout my talk, is whom do you call in global health? Like, was it really the WHO that member states and global health actors called when the crisis hit? And I guess some of us already know the answer. But after the Second World War, when WHO was founded, a lot has happened since. We have tons of new stakeholders that have been founded and operate in the global health architecture. We've got many of the global health funds. As you know, global health has several funds based in Geneva with the Global Fund to fight HIV, TB, and malaria. We have Gavi. We also have the multilateral development banks, such as the World Bank. Most of those focus on low and middle income countries, which explains some of the confusion in our governance and architecture. But we also have other stakeholders, such as international non-governmental organizations. Some of those are really huge. I've worked at one myself. They have multi-billion-dollar budgets per year. They're really big stakeholders and do important work. But as we've seen in the pandemic, we have other stakeholders that are important too in the architecture. We have some of the foundations, and we of course also have the private sector actors. And here I'd also include the digital platforms. I mean, we've seen the really important role they have in helping spread information, but also the downsides with misinformation and disinformation that we've had through those platforms. So going back to the question, who did governments call when the pandemic hit? Like, where was the governance? Did they call the WHO? Yes, kind of, but we also know that that was not the first go-to place for many governments. They went to private sector companies, here in particular pharmaceutical companies. They had bilateral discussions and deals very early on, and they went to foundations. They went to places where they thought, okay, who's going to get stuff done? Who's going to serve our interests and be able to move things quickly? So I think what this shows is we have something on paper, as the article I shared in the pre-reading shows, which says WHO is the place you should call, but the reality is very different. So there are three takeaways I'd love you to think about. The first is global health governance is far from static. We don't just have one institution or a few that operate in the space. It's a dynamic place. Things are constantly changing. We have new stakeholders that are founded regularly and also play different roles at different times. The second takeaway is that what's agreed on paper is not always what happens in practice. So we really need to look into where power structures lie, what's happening, where's the money? And then the third takeaway is who really governs global health? It's to a great extent determined by power. And this is something that the Commission report, I think, was excellent in really highlighting. But I think we shouldn't end there. We should also ask, what is the global health governance we want to see and we need to see? Just going back to the definition of global health being for all people worldwide, the first point I would argue is we want an inclusive global health governance. And this is where digitalization obviously plays such an important potential role. We want all people and all communities, all civil societies to be involved, not just a couple of stakeholders in a couple of countries. The second point is we want it to be equitable. We want affordable quality services, and we want these to be timely in all countries. I think this is another point that we've really seen in the pandemic. We don't want equitable services to be available to all people 20 years down the line. We want them to be available for everybody as soon as possible. And the third point is we need to build a sustainable system. I think this is one of our biggest challenges at the moment. We're still in a system that traps many people, even many countries, into dependency patterns. And we're also not thinking about what harm our policies and services still do, both to the people and the planet. So as I said, I think this is a really important topic. Digitalization provides a huge opportunity to shift some of the global health governance that we have. And ultimately, as I said, the Lancet and FT Commission, I think, really highlights the main point. It's an opportunity to shift some of the power that we have in the system as well. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Katri. Thank you so much. I really love the way that you've structured that. It was really clear about your three main points and three takeaways, which I think is really helpful for us to kind of set up the whole thinking now as we move forward. And I'm going to pass it rather quickly over to Rohinton, who is going to maybe bring us back into the digital transformation aspect within global health governance and his focus as well as participation in the Commission. Over to you, Rohinton.
Thanks, Whitney, and thank you, Katri. Good to see you all, and congratulations for being the 1 in 10. That's a quite remarkable acceptance rate. As an economist, I'm tempted to say the way you handle it is to sell tickets, but you know that illustrates exactly what the story and the challenge with governance is do you allocate scarce resources by prices or by some other criterion? And I hope that comes across in the couple of things I'll say. There are a couple of things that Katri mentioned, and by the way, she and I have not in any way planned it, but I'm thrilled to be doing it in this sequence because she set up a couple of things I'd like to talk about. One is absolutely the diffused nature and the dynamic nature of governance, and I'll come to that in a second. And the other is that you can kind of overdo it and underdo it at the same time. And Katri gave you the example of how in Germany, you were faxing and typing stuff in. Now, in the province where I usually live, in Ontario, I have an anecdote, which is that when the vaccination rollout first happened, you could only book your appointments online. Okay, so you would think, wow, digital health at work. What really happened is it means that older people or people who are not connected in some way could not access health appointments easily. And it took the government a couple of weeks or a month before they instituted an old-fashioned dial-in number so you could call in and make your appointments. And so digital is good. It's a necessary, but it's not a sufficient condition for success is how I'd see it. And all countries have, and developed and developing, have to sort of balance how they roll this out. On the diffused question, one of the sort of graphics we have in our report is one that kind of plots infant mortality on one axis and access to the internet among young people on the other. And what you find is a quite clear negative correlation. You know, the more access you have, the lower is infant mortality. And even if you don't believe that, you know, correlation implies causality, I think there's a story there to be unpacked. And what our report did in many ways was unpack that in many chapters. The other thing that's striking about access to the internet is how unequal it still is. The digital divide, despite all the promise of leapfrogging technology and of the decades now of evidence we have, is still very real. You know, globally, access to the internet for young people is around 33%. It's highest in some of the high-income developing countries in the developing world at 59%, according to our report, and is in the low teens in many parts of Africa. So, as I say, even if you don't believe that correlation is causality, you can't help but notice that. Now, how that plays out is exactly where the governance question is. And we argue in the report that there might be four nodes that are at play here. One is obviously the quality or the extent of digital infrastructure. The second is the nature of your governance and legal system. The third is the political economy of innovation. And the fourth would be the societal context in which rights are provided or exercised. And so a good governance system is going to look at all four of those and get those four right before we move to the question of have we achieved the right outcome. In the remaining of 2 or 3 minutes I have, I'll just leave you with 2 or 3 sets of issues that I think constitute the way forward. And different countries are at different levels. As Katri said, it's not all about the country level. I'd say there's a lot of innovation happening in some sectors and not others, in some regions within countries and not others. Obviously not enough happening at the supra-country level. And I think this is a real challenge, but we're so slowly crab-like getting there. But I'd make the point that to get governance in health right digitally, you first have to take a step back from health and ask yourself, have we got the governance of new technology right? And here, as is indicated in one of the readings that I provided, societies have to create their own norms around new technologies, what they expect of them, where they come from, what use they're put to, and how they're governed. We also have to think about, and I use the analogy of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, we have to think about a global statement or a compact on what kinds of ethics we expect of the innovation sector and how it is that societies apply new technologies to create social welfare. And then the third and more operational point as we move into AI-driven systems is that I think the big policy challenge going forward is going to be algorithmic transparency and algorithmic accountability. Indeed, some of us have called for algorithmic audits. Just as if you're a firm and an auditor can come in and look at your books, at some point we have to think about a process by which auditors can come in, qualified, obviously, professional auditors can come in and look at your algorithms for exactly the same reason that you audit a firm's books. The second set of issues is more connected with data governance itself. And here we have to sort of balance the fact that in health, especially, a lot of the data is intensely private and so has to be pooled in a certain way, with the fact that when this data is appropriately pooled, it yields all kinds of information, both for fundamental research, but also for different aspects of public health and global health. And so creating open databases that are accessible to all, but would still maintain anonymity, is both a technical as well as a governance challenge. We float the concept of so-called data trusts and data cooperatives as one way to get there. And we also need to think about sort of common data protocols or ways in which that data can be stored, gathered, marshaled, and used. That can be at the firm level, it could be sectorally, but in the health system, where governance is often fractured. I mean, in my country, in Canada, we basically have 12 health systems, 10 provinces and 2 territories, and a federal architecture or some kind of umbrella sort of legislation that creates the framework within which these 12 entities operate. Well, how do you make these different data zones talk to each other is a challenge. And then if you multiply that by the number of countries we have, you get a sense of where this is all headed. And the final point I'll make, and sort of leave you with it, is that all of this requires public action. Now, this is not the same as saying that governments only, in fact, I think governments can be working obviously both for good and bad, but it's hard to see how you can have the kind of focused public investments in all of this without public action, or at least public-private partnerships. And so we have to be thinking more creatively about the financing of these kinds of partnerships. Katri correctly mentioned the large NGOs and multilateral development banks, which were created exactly to fund things which may be privately unprofitable, but socially necessary. So that's one avenue. We have to be thinking about transforming public services to deal with the new reality. And we have to be thinking about the kinds of protocols we need in place to truly implement, for example, distance health, which became and has become a big issue post-COVID. If more and more people choose not to go into cities or to work from, as I'm currently in a very idyllic semi-urban or semi-rural place, well, how do you sort of dispose of the workforce in this new digital environment and still have people have access to the kinds of services that we often associate with concentrated urbanization? So those, in my view, are some of the sort of challenges that we face at various governance levels. And Whitney, I'll stop there.
Okay, great, Rohinton. Thank you very much. I feel like that both presentations give you guys a lot of information and wealth of knowledge, where there was a lot of crossover from different perspectives, but oftentimes saying very similar things. So I think you've got this wealth of knowledge, hopefully coming from medical students and your own perspectives, to now go into breakout rooms. We want to hear from you. With this opening introduction of all of the material, we have 3 key questions that we hope you guys will be able to answer together. I'm going to go ahead and drop the Miro board, which we'll be using during the breakout rooms, into the chat discussion. So you can go ahead, click on the link and get that set up. I just want to say that Rohinton will be able to float in between breakout groups 1 and 2, and Katri will join groups 3 and 4. Everybody will be randomly assigned. So we really do hope that you guys will all be considerate and thoughtful of each other's points and contributions. We do have a little bit less time. We'll cut a few minutes from the breakout rooms as well as a few minutes to plenary to make sure that we keep our schedule. But just to give a few points about breakout rooms in general, it's important that each group nominates a moderator, and the main role of the moderator is to then deliver a 90-second presentation during the plenary debrief. Hopefully the way Miro board is set up, you'll see that there are 4 sections for each of the 4 breakout rooms, and you'll have a brainstorming session for each of the questions, and then a second step, which is your kind of concluding remarks that you're going to present in plenary. If you have any questions at all, feel free to ask the facilitators or drop it in the chat, and Adam and I will try to assist. If there's anyone in your group that has difficulties joining the Miro board or able to access it, I do ask that one person would be able to screen share to be able to support the rest in the group. And we're giving everyone access to the Miro board to really promote your own note-taking. So don't rely on one person for that. I really hope that each of you are participatory in that aspect. Is there any outstanding questions before we break up?
Just how many minutes do we need it now?
I think we're going to go about 7 minutes or so.
Okay, let's say 8 minutes.
Okay. And we'll see if we need a bit more time and less time in plenary based on the discussions. I think that I much prefer that. So.
Okay.
All right, Adam, I'll leave it to you, and we'll see you all in the breakout groups.
For the co-hosts, you are free to join manually. You don't have any room notification. Okay.
I see 3 people are unassigned.
Yeah, I'll send.
Okay.
Okay, Christos, room 2. Room 4. Whitney, you choose your own.
Yeah, I might stay in plenary.
Okay.
What's our total, Adam, for the groups so far?
What's our what?
Our attendee total, 7, 6, 12, 14,
25.
26 or so?
25.
25, yeah. Okay, perfect.
To me, from 30, this is really good.
Okay, perfect.
Because many people will sign up for online stuff, not the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if we take the 5, so if we do 10 minutes instead.
It's okay. I made a notification that gives us the opportunity to extend the time if we need.
Okay, perfect. Because it was originally 15, so if we take 5 minutes from there and 5 minutes from plenary, we should be okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the closing poll, I'll open the first poll again because I don't think everyone was able to do it.
Okay.
And so then we'll just do the 2 short polls. And then hand it back to Katri and Rohinton.
Okay, it's good to me. We keep having two people in the main room. Do you, Mab and Dominique, do you have any problems joining? Connection problems? Anything I can help you with? Again, Mab and Dominique, is there anything I can help you with? I assume you have connection issues. Okay. Muhammad, which room were you? Muhammad. Can you hear me? Muhammad. Muhammad. Okay, I'll just assign it to a random room now. Hinton, are you good floating between rooms? Do you require any assistance?
Adam, I think I'll just join throughout all 4 groups to pop the Miro board link because I don't see everyone taking notes yet. So I'll be back in a couple minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Doris, do you need help joining?
Hey, I was in group number 1. Could you add me back? Because, yeah.
Whitney, you're still with me? No, good. Nutella, dude, where the fuck are you? Okay, let's just assign somebody here.
Thanks, Adam.
The 8 minutes are up.
Yeah, I think we'll give it 3 more minutes. I'm gonna do a broadcast message.
Okay.
That way we should get back just 5 minutes different. We might need 5 minutes over, but hopefully people will be okay with that.
It's okay with me. If it's okay with the speakers, then
Yeah, just to have the closing remarks.
yeah.
Because I think from our side, we don't need to say anything except for, like, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I think one thing I'll also say, Adam, is who's the main contact? Do they have your contact information?
Yeah, they have my email and my WhatsApp.
Okay, because I think I'll say that if you're unable to attend any of the sessions, just to make sure you contact us.
Yeah, I took the attendance for today.
Perfect.
Just double check it when they come back. And we have one person in the rooms taking notes and everything's going.
Great. Not many people have the step 2 completed.
Excuse me?
Not many people have the step 2.
Okay. Should we close the room?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say it's the last minute. I can't see the broadcast messages. Have you been seeing them? Okay.
Like the person sending them don't see them, but the others.
Yeah, I think they should change that. That's a bit annoying for.
Evolving. It's it was like years ago, 2 years ago. It was, I would say, a disaster, but it was really not.
Yeah,
Very handy. Now it's much, much better.
it's true. Maybe in the next 2 years, we're gonna be like, oh, wow. Finally, they've gotten everything figured out.
Actually, Google Meet started adding all the features for free. So it's a really good competitor.
Okay, I think I'm gonna close the rooms. It gives everybody 30 seconds. Do you want to go ahead and do that, Adam? Yeah. So it looks like we might start with group 2 because they have everything ready. But let's see.
Good for me.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back from breakout rooms. Apologies if anybody was cut short. I do hate that in breakout rooms when someone's mid-thought and then they all close. So hopefully that wasn't the case. Based on the Miro board, I see some people are still wrapping up some thoughts. So I think it's maybe best to start with breakout group 2. Your boards look very complete, so I will pass it over to the moderator of group 2, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Whitney. So what we discussed in group 2 is that for the first question, I think the main governance gaps that we have noticed are literacy, investments, and infrastructure gaps, especially in rural areas. These take away the chance from a big part of population in various countries, for example, to access internet or other services and bring upon a greater digital transformation that is not, limited to big cities or to a specific part of a population. So what would we select as an appropriate measure to bring on this digital transformation is educating the general population, for example, using widespread campaigns or workshops to build the capacity of people from different areas for different work and experiences when it comes to digital health and use of digital services. And finally, for the role of young people, we believe that platforms and spaces that can bring on interaction and build the capacity of young people is the key to bring a change. And we kind of thought that also what we're doing right now is a good example of that. So this is what we discussed in group 2. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christos. We'll go ahead and pass it over to group 1.
Yes, so I guess it's my turn to talk now. So I'll share my view first. Here it is. So we ran a little bit short on time, but that's okay. So on question 1, first of all, we wanted to see that gaps in the laws that would allow improvement in tech. Also, infrastructure would need improvement. We also talked a little bit about lack of knowledge that people have about digital health, so raising awareness. Also, many gaps are in populations that don't have the same connectivity, so improving that aspect. On to the second question, we would need to create more equitable laws on getting access to technology, and also getting advice on how to improve technological aspects. Then second off, we should revise the laws to be more in touch with the current issues regarding digitalizations, and we should include in local accreditation systems that the requirements for human medicine programs include courses on digital health. And for the third question, we thought that the governments need to take action to encourage these technological improvements, and young people have been born in digital age, so they are also the key to the selection of communication strategies and implementation of digital health. And that's where we landed. Thank you.
Wonderful, Doris. Thank you so much. Let's pass it over to group 3.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm the moderator for group 3, and I'm going to present you our answers. For question 1, we talked about how strong actors control the global health agenda through funding, and how this is going to affect equitable access to digital transformation because of prioritization of different priorities, and not always digital transformation is going to be the priority. We also talked about the point that was raised by Mr. Roynton, the lack of trust in algorithmic structures, that we still do not have sustainable and trustworthy algorithms that we're absolutely sure that they can take over or that they can moderate global health. And of course, there is always going to be the ethical dilemma behind it. There's also a lack of insight among decision makers, as I talked about in the first point. Digital transformation is not prioritized at the moment. And of course, as global health, we have bigger challenges to deal with, but we do believe this is something that should be prioritized, and I think this is why most of us are here. As for question 2, we talked about how youth should be included meaningfully in the decision-making process, because they are the most affected group, because we're the future, through focusing on engaging them through WHO Youth Council. We also talked about emphasizing multi-sectoral action and initiating action and spaces where different sectors can interact and strategize to enrich the conversation and to add more insight into the reforms. We also talked about policies, which we believe is the most important part, because countries and organizations follow policies. So policy reforms should include very specific points about digital transformation of healthcare. As for the third question, we talked about how we should participate in evidence-based research to measure the exact impact of the problem on young people, so we can identify the situation and find the needs assessment. We should also be looking to increase awareness and capacity among medical students, as we are doing here, because as we talked about earlier, there is a lack of global health governance and a global health body. And by capacitating future healthcare workers, you'll have global health leaders in all parts of the world, which is going to be a huge step for global health. And also, we raised the point of active engaging in advocacy actions, and by advocating for causes, this is how it's going to reach a higher audience. It's going to reach more people, and people will start believing in the cause. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think you're going to give a lot to the speakers for their closing remarks, but it's really exciting how there are some crossovers, but also some areas of creativity amongst the groups. I'll pass it over to group 4.
Hi. I share my screen. Okay, so the biggest ideas for the question number 1, we believe the biggest governance are the lack of common approach and alignment between the stakeholders. That's one of the biggest issues we face for inclusive and equitable digital transformation. And the other one is the lack of regulations in data governance. These are the 2 main issues we face at the moment. And for the reforms that are needed to help be addressed, we believe that we need to make every stakeholder to sit in the same room and try to create something, a framework, a common approach, which is in order to to solve this issue, address this issue. And also we need to break the language barriers within the health sector, between different regions and countries, in order to have a kind of shared approach, the same aligned approach for the digital transformation. Who needs to take action? We believe that youth are the ones who need to take action, government, and thoroughly the whole stakeholders, whoever which is a stakeholder part of the digital health, has to take action. And we need to have these actions to be aligned with each other in order to accelerate the kind of structure we have for the inclusive, equitable, and diverse digital health transformation. For the question number 3, actually, this was the same kind of question for the number 2. We didn't see it in the beginning, but if I were to say it right now, what youth can do, first of all, we can bring stakeholders in the same room to talk over the stuff right now. The second thing is to empower ourselves, advocate for the digital health subjects, since we are the future health leaders. And the third part is to create opportunities for youth to be more engaged, like the capacity building workshop we are having right now, and share their part and share their ideas of the future of the health they want to have. Thank you.
Wonderful, Aman, thank you. And yeah, I appreciate everybody for being able to actually comment on the last question that was not copy and pasted correctly in the group. So round of applause for there. That's totally my fault. I did the Miro board, so I'll take that. But I'm really happy to see that you all were able to kind of answer that question despite that. I think we'll go ahead while we let Rohinton and Katri maybe catch some of their closing remarks. We'll go ahead and open the Slido poll again. I'll pop it in the chat really quickly. It should take you to the first question because I think we started it before everyone had joined. So we'll just give maybe 1 minute for that. I also want to say that I've been in a lot of breakout groups, and you guys should be proud that you pretty much all stuck to the time limit. That's a miracle, honestly. So bravo there. You conquered that task brilliantly. Hopefully everyone now can see the Slido poll. I'll go ahead and share my screen so that we can all start to see the remarks that are coming in. If you have any technical issues, please drop it in the chat. I think we can also move on to the second question. And this is, what is stopping more young people from collaborating with policymakers and technology companies on the design and governance of digital first health systems? So it's kind of similar to the question number 3 that we had in breakout groups, but a little bit different. This idea around digital first health systems is one of the main priority areas of our new campaign, which is around My Health Futures. I kind of encourage you all to check it out. And if you're willing and able to also maybe provide some comments or short videos about what you think about digital first health systems. So we've got lack of opportunity, lack of interest. We have no voice with a very sad emoji. I like that. Lack of knowledge, education, opportunities gap, and lack of capacity building. I think that was something that was actually said in all 4 groups. So it's great that we're here today specifically on that. I will leave the poll open for a few more minutes, but I will go ahead in lieu of time, pass it over to Katri and Rohinton for closing remarks. I think we will then kind of come back just for a final last minute close, and then we'll let you all be free for the rest of your Saturday. Katri, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. And thanks for letting us listen in on the really rich discussion and see the summaries. I've got a couple of points that I'd like to give with you just based on having heard some of the discussion as well. The first is in the future work that you'll be doing also hopefully on this issue is try to get as granular as possible. With this, I mean, try to use practical real life examples so that we're not talking in too much abstraction. I think that's really something that also helps policymakers and other stakeholders get energized and prioritize the agenda when they understand what it's about. So try to use real life challenges, try to use examples of what works already, maybe elsewhere, and try to share those with all of the stakeholders that you can. The second, I think that was clear in the discussion as well, you need to engage both nationally and globally. So a lot of policies are made at the national level, but in order to really have a lot of impact on global health and all populations, you do also need to get engaged on the global level. So I love the idea of engaging through the WHO Youth Council. I think they're great networks and commissions, of course, like this one, where you need to bring in your voice and advocate for that voice to be included. And the third, which I really, the statistics that Rohinton introduced in the beginning really blew my mind. Don't forget inclusion and equity also within this group. I mean, knowing that only 30+% of the population has access to the internet means that a lot of people are not being able to engage even in this discussion. So I think if that is one of the principles that we're trying to work towards, I think trying to use your role and your networks to broaden that inclusion as well is incredibly important because so many people are still left out even of these discussions. So that's my final point. Thank you.
Look, I sort of echo what Katri said. I found this an immensely sort of rich and rewarding experience. I wish we had more time, the proverbial more time. I'm struck by the commonality of our thinking, and that makes sense, even though we come from different cultural and geographic and disciplinary backgrounds. We seem to focus on digital literacy, access, gaps, governance, and the role of legislation. All of that leads me to say that we're sort of citizens first before we're anything else. And so that's a thought. The one thing we didn't touch on, and I just sort of briefly mentioned it, and it's in our report, that I think we might want to think about also, is this question of what we call, sort of obscurely in our report, the political economy of innovation. And that's come across loud and clear with the current COVID-19 vaccine. I don't hesitate to say in many groups like this, COVID-19 vaccine fiasco. What it shows is not just vaccine inequity, meaning some countries are at 15, 18% vaccination rates, others are slightly higher, and we're staring this fall at 8th and 9th waves, but it shows how concentrated and undemocratic innovation itself is. It's not enough to produce something here and then give it away as charity there. I think we have to think about decentralizing innovation itself. And since digitization depends so much on intellectual property and on intense R&D and on proprietary interests, we have to think about making that process of innovation, which is to say, pre-distributional issues. It's not enough to take innovation as a given and then talk about how we divide the pie. We have to think about how is the pie made? Where is it getting made? And so if I have a thought for the future, it is to not just sort of, think about distribution, but to think about the act of creation itself. And that's especially important when new technologies drive our welfare. So I'll stop on that one.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rohinton and Katri. I wish we did have a bit more time because there are so many great thoughts that are circulating, and hopefully we've sparked a lot of, discussion in your own brains and hopefully maybe within your small groups. But I don't want to keep you over our time. We are based in Switzerland, so they're really prompt on their time, and I like that. So if there's anything outstanding, feel free to contact Adam directly. You should all have his contact information. If you have any difficulties joining for tomorrow, please reach out to us. I just want to give a big round of applause to Katri and Rohinton for taking time and joining our discussion and really joining thoroughly, not just presenting, but also joining in the breakout groups. I think that's really great. Also, a huge round of applause to all of the participants. So far, so good from my side. I'm quite excited to see how the next two series and sessions go.